Okay, everybody, in last class I talked about the lymphatic system, and you know that lymphatic system is responsible for immunity, right? To protect your body. So today we'll talk about the immunity. First, we'll see different types of immunity present in the body. Then we'll talk about the mechanisms of action, how different types of immunity work. Then we'll talk about antibodies, structure of an antibody and how it works. Then we'll talk about different types of immunity, cell-mediated, humoral immunity, active and passive immunity. Okay? So first, what is immunity? Human body has the ability to protect itself against antigens, right? You all know that your body has the ability to fight against microorganisms, right, or antigens. That ability is called immunity. Okay? Now, immunity is very important for your body, because if the immunity in your body is low, then your body can be attacked by antigens or microorganisms easily, right? So your body will be attacked by microorganisms or antigens that try to invade into your body all the time. Okay? Now, immunity of your body is divided into two types: innate and adaptive or acquired immunity. Okay, so you now know what is immunity, the ability to fight against antigens, and immunity is two types. One type is called innate and another type is called adaptive. Adaptive immunity is also called acquired. Acquired immunity, same thing. Okay? Now, innate immunity is the immunity that your body gets by birth. Everybody gets it, okay, by birth. Example, skin. Everybody has a skin, right? Mucous membrane. Mucous membrane. You know, mucous membrane lines the respiratory tract, right? Inner lining of respiratory tract, your nose, trachea, larynx, right? You have inner lining. That is mucous membrane. Inner lining of your GI tract, your mouth, your esophagus, intestine, right? You have inner lining. So those are the mucous membranes. Make sense? And we get the skin, everybody gets by birth, right? Mucous membrane everybody has. So those are innate. We get this even before birth, when the fetus, right, is inside mother's uterus, gets those structures. Then in your tissue, you have tissue macrophages or phagocytic cells. Better you say phagocytic cells of your tissue. Example, tissue macrophages, also dendritic cells you have. Those are phagocytic cells. Okay? Everybody has in the tissue. Macrophages are present in every body, right? and they do what? Phagocytosis, you know that. Okay. A chemical that is secreted or released by the infected cell. When your body gets, infected, the tissue releases a chemical that is called interferon. Interferon. It is a chemical released by the infected tissue or cells. Make sense? So everybody has interferon in the tissue. Okay? So you see, these belong to innate: skin, mucous membrane, in your respiratory tract, GI tract, macrophages or phagocytic cells in the tissue, and interferon, and all of us, we have already those in the body. Okay, we get by birth. Adaptive or acquired immunity is different in different people, because adaptive immunity is produced in the body in response to antigen. In response to what? Antigen. Like you got typhoid before, okay? Your body has produced immunity against it, typhoid virus. Is it clear? I didn't get, so my body did not produce it. So after birth, when you get exposed to particular type of antigen, your body produces that immunity. Make sense? Against that. So that is like you got swine flu. Nobody else got it, okay? So your body has produced immunity against swine flu. Is it clear? So that's why it could be different person to person, right? And it is created after birth when we get exposed to particular antigen. Make sense? Okay. So adaptive after birth. Due to exposure to antigen. Now you tell me, simple question, which one is specific? This one or this one? Highly specific. Adaptive, right? Against specific antigen. Is it clear? So adaptive or acquired immunity is highly specific. Highly specific. Created only to respond an antigen. Is your skin highly specific or generalized? Generalized, right? It will try to stop everything that tries to get in, right? Because it is just a covering. Mucous membrane is also like that. When you breathe, if any antigen, right, enters, it will try to stop the inner lining. When you eat food, inner lining of your GI tract will try to stop that, microorganism from entering into the body from your stomach. So these are non-specific. Okay? Immunity. And acquired or adaptive is highly specific immunity. Okay? Now, when an antigen tries to invade into your body, who will try to stop it first? Your skin and mucous membrane. Because those are the layers, right? Covering your body. So, those belong to first line defense. First line of defense. Skin and mucous membrane. Just think simple. If anything tries to enter into your body, your skin will try to stop it first, right? So, if through the nose, the mucous membrane of your respiratory, if through the food, mucous membrane of your GI tract. So, those belong to first line of defense. If somehow that antigen penetrates through the skin and enters into the tissue, right? Under the skin you have the muscles and other tissues, right? So if that antigen is able to pass through the first line defense, then who will try to kill them? Macrophages and interferon. Okay, so these belong to phagocytic cells and interferons. These belong to what? Second line of defense. Makes sense? Okay. So if your skin and mucous membrane, first line of defense phase, then right, the antigen will enter into the tissue. Your tissue macrophages will try to engulf them, right? And interferons, the chemicals, will try to kill them. Now, just know, you can write it down. Interferon is a signal protein. We say interferon is a signal protein that is released from the healthy cells, released from the infected cells. So, like this is your tissue, okay? The cells in the tissue, and these few cells got infected here, okay? The microorganisms have infected them. What will happen? These infected cells will release interferon. That signal protein will be released by these infected cells. And the interferon will tell the healthy cells, adjacent healthy cells, that, infection is there, you be alert, okay? Be ready, okay? So that is the signal. So that signal protein is released from the infected cells and tells the surrounding healthy cells that you get alert, okay? Ready to fight. Is it clear? So that is interferon. Anyway, so that is second line of defense, phagocytic cells and interferons. Then adaptive immunity is the third line of defense. Third line of defense. Okay? So we have 3 lines of defense in the body. In battlefield, old time, right? Soldiers, they used to fight face to face, right? They used to create what? Lines, right? Layers. First line will go first, right? If that is destroyed, then second line will come forward, right? So in your body, you have similar way your immune system works. It has 3 lines of defense. Okay. So now, adaptive immunity is further divided into cellular and humoral. Okay, so cellular and humoral immunity. Cellular is given by T cells. Now you must remember T and B cells, T and B lymphocytes. Okay, so cellular immunity is given by T lymphocytes or T cells. Do you remember in last class I mentioned T cells and B cells? Those are the main warriors, right? Fighters. They get training, right? T cells get training in thymus, right? B cells get training in bone marrow. That's why T and B. Okay, so cellular immunity is given by T cells. Humoral immunity is given by B cells or B lymphocytes. Okay. The word humoral means fluid. aqueous humor, vitreous humor, remember, inside the eye, the fluid. So humor means fluid. And B cells do what? Secrete antibodies into the body fluid. That's why, since the B cells work through antibodies, in last class I mentioned, you must remember, I said, if the enemy is weak, you see the enemy won't harm you, won't be able to harm you. If it comes close to you, you will grab, right? But if you think that enemy could be harmful, if he comes close to you, you won't take that risk, right? You remember I said that? You will maybe shoot from far. So B cells secrete what? Antibodies. That will go to the enemy, right? The antigen, and destroy them. So antibodies are secreted into the body fluid. That's why B cell mediated or antibodies mediated immunity is called humoral immunity. Okay? T cells do phagocytosis mainly, so that's why cellular will do phagocytosis. Okay? Now, humoral could be two types. Humoral could be two types: active and passive. Okay? Then both active and passive could be natural and artificial. This one also natural and artificial. Okay? Artificial. So that is the entire classification of your immunity. First, let's go back. Immunity is divided into two: innate and adaptive or acquired. Okay? Innate gives first and second lines of defense, right? And adaptive or acquired gives third line of defense. Which one is highly specific? Adaptive, right? And this is non-specific. Is it clear? Then adaptive is divided into cellular and humoral. In cellular, T cells are responsible. In humoral, B cells, right? Now how B cells work? By secreting antibodies. That's why it is called humoral fluid. Then humoral could be what? Active or passive. And both active and passive could be natural or artificial. Okay? Now, what is the difference between active and passive? Its name is telling you, right? If any bacteria or virus enters into your body, then your body will produce antibodies against it, right? Make sense? Specifically against it. That is active, because your body is producing antibody actively in response to antigen. Make sense? So that is an example of what? Active. Now you tell me, your immune system is very weak. Okay? Like AIDS virus destroy the immune system. Probably you know that, right? So a patient of AIDS whose immune system has been destroyed, okay? If any bacteria or virus enters, his body cannot produce enough antibody. Is it clear? So in that case, what you will do? Since his body cannot produce, you will make antibody outside of the body, right? From somewhere else, you will get antibody and inject what? Antibody into his body, because his body cannot produce. So is that active or passive? Passive. Makes sense? Because his body is not producing actively. Okay? So in healthy person, the body is actively producing, right? So that is active humoral. Clear? Okay, now you tell me. An infant, his immune system is very weak, right? Infant, because hasn't developed yet. So when the infant gets mother's milk, in mother's milk you have certain antibodies. So infant gets mother's milk, right? And with mother's milk, antibodies enter into the infant's body. So infant's body, is that immunity is active or passive? Passive, makes sense, right? Getting from outside, another person. So that is passive, right? Is that natural or artificial? Natural, right? Milk, mother's milk, natural, right? Is it clear? Now when I give antibodies, inject, like buying from, store or from pharmacy, I inject that. Is that not natural or artificial? Artificial, because manufactured, right? In the pharmaceuticals. Is it clear? So, natural, artificial, active, passive. You got the idea, okay? Example, active natural is microorganisms, microbes, okay? Bacteria, virus, natural, right? They're present in nature, the live bodies. Artificial is, in this case, vaccine. We inject vaccine, very small amount, right? To do what? To stimulate the person's immune system. What's the purpose of injecting vaccine into the body? Vaccine is not antibody. Vaccine is antigen. Basically, vaccine is microorganisms. Is it clear? But microorganisms we inject into the body in harmless manner. We are injecting what? Microorganisms, but what? In harmless way. Like breaking the legs and hands of microorganisms, okay? Making them highly inactive. But still, they can do what? The purpose is when you inject those microorganisms or vaccine into the body, they will not do any harm, right? They should not, vaccine should not, do harm. Those microorganisms should not do any harm, but they should be able to trigger the production of antibody in your body. Make sense? That's the purpose. So what we do in the labs, we highly attenuated, that means highly inactivate, suppress the antigens, microorganisms. Make sense? And then in a small dose, we inject into the body. So that microorganisms will not do what? Harm, but will do what? Stimulate the body to produce enough antibody. So to stop any future invasion from outside. Is it clear? So your body is actually producing antibody, right? In response to that. So that is active. Is it clear? And since vaccine is manufactured, right, it is artificial. Make sense? So active artificial is vaccine. Active natural is microorganisms. When they enter, your body actively produce antibodies. Passive natural, mother's milk. Mother's milk and passive artificial antibodies. For example, AIDS patient, okay, antibodies from outside. We are not injecting vaccine, but we are injecting ready-made antibodies. Okay, so that's how we classify the immunity. Okay. We have talked about the properties of white blood cells when we talked about the blood, right? You remember diapedesis, chemotaxis, phagocytosis, those. Now, adaptive or acquired is highly specific. You already know. Is systemic. That means circulates throughout the body, not localized. It is present everywhere, right? Antibodies secreted, goes everywhere, right? T cells, B cells are everywhere in the body. right, in the lymphatic system. So it is not localized or rather system. Has memory. That is another important thing. Innate or acquired immune system or immunity has memory. You all know that. You remember sometimes we say that if you get any, microorganisms first time, then that you got sick, right? Then second time, like 1 year after, same microorganism, if it tries to enter into your body is more ready. We say that, right? The chance of subsequent infection is less. We always say that, right? You got it before, so chance is less. First timer, chance is more, right? So that tells you what? Somewhere in your body, right, the information about your first exposure is recorded, kept that information, right? So when second time, same type of antigen tries to enter into your body is better prepared, right? So will act more quickly. Make sense? So that tells that somewhere in adaptive immune system you have memory. So three things: highly specific, right? Developed specifically against specific antigens that I have explained before, right? Number two, systemic. T and B cells are circulating everywhere throughout the body, right? Antibodies are circulating everywhere. So systemic. Number three is what? Has memory. It can keep record of previous attack. Is it clear? So second time it will fight better. So I have explained this in last class that when the lymphocytes are produced in the bone marrow, they are naive, they don't know much how to fight. Some cells go to the thymus and get their maturation there, and when they come out they become T cells. And some cells get matured in the bone marrow and they become B lymphocytes or B cells. Okay? And that's why they fight differently. That's what they have shown here. You see, bone marrow produces lymphocytes. Some of them will go to thymus, some of them will be trained in the bone marrow, okay? And they will come out as T and B cells and will be housed inside the lymphatic system. We know that lymph nodes, spleen, thymus, tonsils, they house huge number of T and B lymphocytes. So they will be housed there, and when need, they will be proliferated, increased in number by mitosis. Okay, so we have already talked about that. Active and passive, and both could be natural or artificial. Yeah. Same thing, you see here, they have started from here. Humoral, active, passive, natural, artificial. Okay? So in this one, I have shown you the whole thing, right? How we classify the immunity. This is just part of it. Now, antibodies. Antibodies are proteins. But proteins could be many different types. Which type of proteins? Immunoglobulins. You remember albumins, globulins, fibrinogens, plasma proteins? All of you should remember, right? Albumins, globulins, fibrinogens. At that time, I said globulins are responsible for what? Immunity. Remember that? So, that's why this type of globulin is called immunoglobulin. The globulin that gives what? Immunity. So, they are called immunoglobulins. Okay. Immunoglobulins could be many different types. Five types are very common or more abundant. Immunoglobulin A, E, G, D, M. So these are more common immunoglobulins. Immunoglobulin A, D, M, G, E. Ig means immunoglobulin. Okay? So different types. There are more. Just know these are the common types. Okay? If you see the structure of an immunoglobulin, immunoglobulins are usually Y or T-shaped structure. So Y shape or T shape, like this. So if you see here, this is Y-shaped immunoglobulin, and it has 4 polypeptide chains. 1, 2, 3, 4. These 2 are called heavy chains because they are bigger. Heavy chains. And these 2 are light, smaller and light. Okay? So 4. And each of those 4 has 2 parts. Okay? Variable part and fixed part. So this is a light, you see, this is a heavy, and it has 2 parts. The variable part and fixed part. Okay? Variable part is also called antigen binding site. So let's do it here. So this is one light. It has variable part is this part, and fixed part is this part. This one also has same variable part, and this part is the fixed part. Okay? Variable part and then fixed part. So variable part is also called antigen binding site. Okay? And this is the fixed part. Okay? So variable part is also called antigen binding part or site. Make sense? So we know that antibodies bind with antigens. To destroy them or inactivate them, antibodies must get attached to the antigen. Okay? So for example, any bacteria has entered into your body. Okay? Antibodies will be produced against that bacteria, make sense, and will get attached to the surface of the antigen. So this is an antigen, for example, bacteria. So many antibodies will get attached to them, attached to it. So these are antibodies, this is antigen. Antigen, and these are antibodies. And this whole thing is called antigen antibody complex. Antigen antibody complex together. Make sense? So few things are here. What's the shape of an antibody usually? T or Y shape, right? And each antibody has 2 heavy, 2 light chains, right? And all of them have what? How many parts? 2 parts. Variable and fixed, right? Variable part is also called what? Antigen binding site. Make sense? That means this part will bind with the antigen, right? And you see here that this part gets attached to the antigen. Make sense? these parts. And form what? A complex. That is called what? Very simple. Antigen antibody complex. Is all these are just think, and these are simple. Okay. So antibodies work by forming antigen antibody complex. That means they must get attached to the antigens to destroy them or inactivate them. Okay? Okay. How antibodies destroy or inactivate antigens? Bacteria or virus, how they are destroyed by antibodies? By three main ways. Those are by neutralization, agglutination, and precipitation. Okay, so those are the three main ways how the antibodies inactivate or destroy the antigens. Okay, neutralization, precipitation, and agglutination. Before we talk about that, let's talk about a little more the T cells. Very important. T cells could be different types of T cells. One type is called cytotoxic T cells. Okay. Another type is called helper T cells. Okay. Suppressor T cells. And the fourth type is memory T cells. So these are different types of T cells. Cytotoxic T cells are also called, commonly heard, natural killer cells. So cytotoxic T cells are also called natural killer cells. Make sense? Then you have helper T cells, suppressor T cells, memory T cells. So cytotoxic. Cyto means what? Cell. First lecture in NP1 I said cyto means cell, right? Histo means tissue. So cytotoxic T cells. That means this type of T cells can kill the cells. Okay? That's why cytotoxic. What type of cells of your body should be killed?
Cancer.
Cancer cells. Make sense? Tumor cells, right? Or infected cells, those we don't need. They got infected, better kill them, okay? So, you see, your cytotoxic T cells kill the cells, but those cells are harmful, right? Like infected cells, cancer cells, tumor cells. Is it clear? Okay. How they work, very interesting. See, this is a bacteria, antigen or bacteria, okay? Bacteria, and this is your natural killer cell, cytotoxic T cell, okay? So when it will see a bacteria, it will release a chemical that is called perforin. Perforins. Okay? The perforins will be released by cytotoxic T cells, and those perforins will get attached to the membrane of bacteria, cell membrane of bacteria, and will make holes into it, pores. Okay, or holes on the bacterial cell wall. Is it clear? And then after that, the cytotoxic T cells will secrete another chemicals. These are called granzymes, these chemicals. And these chemicals will now easily get into the bacteria, bacterial cytoplasm. So granzymes will get into the bacteria. Make sense? So now let's go back again. So when a natural killer cell or cytotoxic T cell will come contact or close to the bacteria, first it will release what? Perforins, right? And they will get attached to the bacterial surface and will make what? Holes. Then the cytotoxic T cells will release what? Granzyme, that chemical. It's an enzyme that will get into, right, the bacteria through the holes or pores and will degrade the metabolism, will stop the metabolism of bacteria. So stop metabolism of bacteria. So bacteria will not be able to produce ATP, make sense? Will die. Is it clear? If metabolism of bacteria is stopped, then it will, what happen? Die. And that is called apoptosis. Anybody heard it? The term? Recently very commonly used term. Apoptosis. Death of cell. So the bacteria will die. Apoptosis of bacteria. So that's how the cytotoxic T cells work. You see how beautifully, right? So all these happen in very small, tiny, micro level. Okay, so that is cytotoxic T cells. Helper T cells. Helper T cells so this is now a helper T cell, okay, and this is another type of cells present in the body. These cells are called antigen presenting cell. So this is an antigen presenting cell, this one, and this is a helper T cell. Helper T cell, okay? When the bacteria or antigen enters into the body, first what happens in this case, the antigen presenting cell, its name is telling you its function. It will get attached to that antigen or bacteria, okay? So first the antigen presenting cells will hold the antigen and then will get attached to the helper T cell. So antigen presenting cell will get the antigen and will present to the helper T cells. Then helper T cells will do what now? Will release a chemical that is called cytokine. very important chemical, will be released by helper T cell. Cytokine. There are different types. You can say cytokines. And cytokines will do what? Will activate T and B cells. T cells and B cells. So T cells will do their function, B cells will produce antibodies and will do their functions. So their functions will be activated, increased. So that's how the helper T cell works. Let's review it, okay? So to activate helper T cells, antigen presenting cell first will get attached to the microorganism. Is it clear? And then it will present the antigen to the helper T cell, okay? Like hold the antigen and go to the helper T cell, that I got it, okay? So you do your task now. I got the antigen and giving it to you, okay? So when the antigen presenting cell will get attached to